The summer of 1683 was not defined by the bright sun, but by a creeping shadow. Across Central Europe, the sound of marching feet was swallowed by the oppressive silence of fear. This was the moment history had dreaded. The Ottoman Empire had mobilized its full might, turning its formidable gaze toward the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, Vienna. What if the line between two civilizations was not a river or a mountain, but the crumbling stone of a single besieged city? For centuries, the sultans had pushed westward, consuming kingdoms and rewriting maps. Now, under the command of Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, an army of perhaps 150,000 men moved like a terrible, focused storm against the final bastion. The darkness of this impending conflict was not just political, it was existential. The stakes involved more than land. They involved the very identity of Europe. Should Vienna fall, the road to the Rhine and the Atlantic would lay open, ending 1,000 years of cultural evolution in fire and submission. The scale of the Ottoman war machine defied imagination. Elite Janissary infantry, Sipahi heavy cavalry, and ruthless Tatar auxiliaries formed a host of terrifying diversity. They brought with them not just weapons, but the vast infrastructure of siege warfare, immense cannons, endless stores, and engineers ready to tunnel beneath the proud foundations of the Habsburg capital. By July, the truth was undeniable. The siege had begun. Emperor Leopold I, in a move that historians still debate, abandoned his city, fleeing west to Linz. He left behind a skeleton force, 15,000 soldiers and a desperate civilian militia to face the greatest army Europe had seen in a century. Command of the doomed garrison fell to Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg, a man of cold, unyielding resolve. His mission was simple yet impossible: hold the city until salvation arrived, even if that salvation was a myth. For the next 2 months, Vienna would descend into a living, suffocating hell. On July 14th, the Ottoman vanguard appeared, and 3 days later, the encirclement was complete. Kara Mustafa, arrogant and assured, set up a sprawling, luxurious encampment, a field of silk and opulence that mocked the starving inhabitants trapped within the walls. He did not plan to storm the city, but to choke it into surrender. The earth began to shake. Ottoman engineers tunneled relentlessly beneath the bastions, planting immense charges of gunpowder, hoping to rip the city's ancient defenses apart from below. Above ground, artillery pulverized the walls day and night, turning homes into dust and marble into rubble. Inside Vienna, life became a nightmare of diminishing returns. Food was strictly rationed. The water supply dwindled. Disease, inevitable in the cramped cellars and shelters, spread faster than the fires started by the bombardment. Yet Starhemberg's spirit remained unbreakable, fueling the defiance of soldier and citizen alike. The defenders fought with a desperate, savage ingenuity. When the walls were breached, they were filled with debris, timber, and the bodies of the fallen. When the mines exploded, men rushed into the smoke and dust to meet the enemy hand to hand in the rubble, sealing the gaps with their lives. This was the true test of human endurance, not the glorious charge, but the slow, agonizing collapse under endless pressure. Vienna was a dying heart, beating only through sheer willpower, knowing that every minute they held out increased the odds, however slim, that the world beyond their walls might hear their cries. The thunder of the Ottoman cannons was heard not only in the city, but across the continent. Each distant boom was a plea, a warning that the collapse of Vienna would shatter the stability of Europe forever. Emperor Leopold's appeals for aid were frantic, yet the response was initially muted, crippled by centuries of petty European rivalry. But this time, the threat was too great to ignore. From Rome, Pope Innocent V recognized the siege as a spiritual and civilizational crisis. He began the tireless diplomatic work of forging the Holy League, demanding that Christian rulers set aside their disputes for the common defense. His greatest victory was convincing King John III Sobieski of Poland to commit his army. Sobieski was a king forged in battle, a commander whose victories against the Ottomans and Tatars were legendary. He was the man Europe desperately needed, a practical tactician and a fearsome warrior. Sobieski's decision was immediate and decisive. He declared that to save Vienna was to save Poland, recognizing that if the empire fell, his own kingdom would be next. Against the counsel of many of his nobles, he mobilized his forces, including the feared Winged Hussars. The Holy League, a patchwork assembly of Polish, Bavarian, Saxon, and imperial forces, began their grueling march. Rivalry still simmered and coordination was difficult, yet the common danger fused them together. They were 70,000 strong, the last desperate hope for the city and the continent. By September 10th, after a punishing march through forests and mountains, the combined relief army stood on the heights overlooking Vienna. Below them lay the vast confident sea of the Ottoman encampment, and beyond it the battered smoke-choked ruin of the city. The stage was set for a confrontation that would define the era. Kara Mustafa, still convinced of his imminent victory, misjudged the arrival of the relief force. He split his troops, some continuing the siege, others turning to face the army gathering on the heights. He believed he could crush the attackers and still starve Vienna into submission. This fatal arrogance would be his final tactical mistake. Sobieski stood atop the Kallenberg Ridge surveying the field. Time was the enemy. Every hour risked Vienna's collapse. His plan was audacious, not a grinding infantry battle but a decisive, overwhelming blow, utilizing the terrain to conceal his most formidable weapon. On the morning of September 12th, the battle began. Allied infantry and German regiments descended the wooded slopes, pushing hard against the Ottoman flanks, forcing them backward. All day the grinding combat continued, muskets, cannons, and close-quarters savagery tearing at both armies. As the afternoon wore on, the Ottoman lines began to stretch thin and falter. Kara Mustafa desperately fed more men into the fray, but the relentless pressure of the Allied advance was too great. Sobieski saw his opening, the moment of exhaustion, the breaking point. From his hidden position, Sobieski gave the order. The earth itself seemed to groan. It was the charge of nearly 20,000 horsemen, led by the legendary Polish Winged Hussars, ready to descend the steep slopes in a terrifying, calculated torrent. The Hussars were a sight of terrifying beauty. Clad in shining steel, lances lowered, they were distinguished by the towering wooden frames affixed to their backs, adorned with eagle feathers. As they rode, the wind caught the plumes, creating an eerie, high-pitched scream that unnerved men and horses alike. The sheer scale of the assault was unmatched in European history. The thunder of thousands of hooves rolled through the valley, accelerating into a furious, unstoppable wave. Sobieski, refusing to command from safety, rode at the head of the spear. The impact was catastrophic. The Hussars struck the already weakened Ottoman lines with the force of a natural disaster, smashing through cavalry, shattering infantry formations, and driving panic deep into the heart of the Grand Vizier's army. Ranks of Sipahi cavalry scattered. Janissary discipline finally broke. Sobieski and his horsemen cut directly toward Kara Mustafa's command tent. The Grand Vizier, realizing the magnitude of the disaster, fled his opulent headquarters in chaotic haste, abandoning his standards and treasure. What had been a meticulously organized siege collapsed into a full-scale rout within minutes. From the battered walls, the defenders of Vienna poured out, joining the pursuit, their cheers mixing with the sounds of chaos. The city was saved. The greatest cavalry charge in history had closed the gateway to Europe. The defeat was absolute. The once dreaded Ottoman army dissolved into a desperate flight eastward, abandoning everything: cannons, supplies, and the shattered dream of conquest. Every road became a trail of ruin, every river crossing a killing ground. The consequences of this single day rippled across centuries. Vienna marked not just a pause in Ottoman expansion, but the beginning of a long, slow strategic retreat. The balance of power was violently and irreversibly shifted, ushering in a new era of European ascendance. The cost, however, was immense. The battlefield was strewn with the fallen, and Vienna itself bore the permanent scars of months of bombardment. The victory was stained with the knowledge that such salvation required this level of organized, merciless violence. Sobieski, hailed as the savior of Christendom, rode triumphantly through the shattered streets, acclaimed by the starved, grateful citizens. The tale of the Winged Hussars became the stuff of legend, a haunting whisper of feathered might descending from the hills. Yet history teaches us that triumph is fleeting. The unity forged in the heat of battle quickly cooled. Political disputes resumed, and the price of the battle was paid in decades of further conflict along the frontier. Vienna survived, but the darkness of imperial rivalry remained. The Siege of 1683 remains a stark lesson in fate, courage, and the razor-thin margin between survival and annihilation. It is a reminder that the defense of civilization is often secured not by grand ideals, but by desperate sacrifice, standing firm against the shadow when all hope seems lost. The great Ottoman challenge had been repelled. Europe, once trembling beneath a crescent, had found its resolve. But the ghosts of Vienna, the starvation, the explosions, the terror of 2 months of hell, would forever linger in the city's memory, a testament to the brutal, dark history of power and survival.